The last thing Maya Bennett expected on a regular Monday morning was to be told she'd be leaving Seattle in just a few hours. One urgent meeting, a sudden flight to Vancouver, and no one else accompanying her except Evan Carter, the man who, without meaning to, had taken up far too much space in her mind these past months. Everything unfolded like a storm with no warning. An email from upper management, a brief knock on her cubicle wall, Evan's calm voice telling her to pack a bag and meet him outside. Within minutes, she was in a taxi beside him, the city streaking by in a blur while she struggled to catch up with what was happening. One moment she was double-checking spreadsheets. The next, she was sitting beside her boss on a plane, trying to hold herself together while her heart hammered like a frantic drum. The flight had been booked last minute. She ended up in the window seat, and Evan settled right next to her, close enough that every breath felt obvious. It was just work, she reminded herself. But the quiet between them didn't feel like office silence. Not awkward, not cold. Something warmer. Awareness wrapped in silence. He typed for a while, focused and unreadable. Yet away from the office, beneath the soft cabin lights, he looked different, human. The light shadows under his eyes, the stiff set of his shoulders. He seemed to be carrying the kind of tiredness he didn't let anyone notice. When he finally shut his laptop with a weary exhale, Mia turned slightly, pretending she wasn't studying him. He caught her looking and gave her a small smile, warm, tired, and unexpectedly unguarded. Long day already, he murmured. She nodded, even though her day had barely begun. The simple exchange tightened something in her chest. She wasn't supposed to feel anything when he smiled like that. A sudden bump of turbulence jolted the plane, and Evan instinctively reached for the armrest. His hand brushed hers, a fleeting touch, gone in a heartbeat, but heat rushed through her like a spark catching dry leaves. He pulled back quickly, cheeks coloring. Neither of them spoke, but the moment lingered like static in the air. When they arrived in Vancouver, gray clouds hung low over the skyline, and the air smelled sharply of winter. They hurried through the airport, still prepping for the next morning's meeting. But the momentum slammed to a stop when the front desk clerk at the hotel frowned at the screen. A booking mistake. Only one suite available. Mia felt her pulse leap. Evan simply accepted the key, all calm professionalism on the outside. In the elevator, she tried to convince herself it wasn't a big deal. A suite meant separate sleeping spaces. Space to breathe. Space to pretend none of this felt different. The room was beautiful. 2 separate bedrooms, a shared living area, giant windows overlooking the city lights. Nothing inappropriate. Yet every inch of it reminded her they were alone, and that nothing about this situation felt ordinary. She placed her bag down a little too quickly, determined not to show nerves. Evan glanced at her, aware of her silence. "We'll keep everything professional," he said softly. "Just work and rest. Nothing strange." He wasn't the problem. Her racing thoughts were. They settled into work, hours of refining slides, circles of data, adjusting phrasing, and somewhere amid the exhaustion, Evan became more real. He spoke casually, laughed once when he misread a line, and rubbed the tiredness from his eyes in a way that made him look young and vulnerable. Standing by the window, he said quietly, "Funny how a place can feel so unfamiliar when you're far from home." She didn't know if he meant Vancouver or something heavier. For a second, he wasn't her boss, just a man trying to keep life from overwhelming him. Later, they moved to the couch, reviewing speaking order by the glow of soft lamps. The closeness felt different now, carefully charged. Every time their hands brushed while exchanging notes, a spark followed, tiny but impossible to ignore. At one point, he leaned back, rubbing his forehead. "I'm not usually this scattered," he said with a tired smile. "I'm just coming out of a rough few months." Mia hesitated. Concern tugged at her. He told her about a breakup, nothing dramatic, just quiet heartbreak that still found ways to ache. The vulnerability in his voice pulled at her in places she usually kept locked away. She listened without interrupting, offering no empty reassurance, just presence. When he finished, he thanked her gently, a sincerity in his voice that sent warmth through her. The walls between them had lowered, not by intention, but by truth. Everything felt different now. Every glance, every word, every breath in the same room. Hours later, needing air, Mia stepped out onto the balcony. Cold night wind brushed against her skin, helping her calm the restless emotions swirling inside. The noise of the city below felt like a reminder that the world was still moving, even if this moment felt suspended. The sliding door opened behind her and Evan approached, handing her a warm cup of tea. They stood side by side, silent, watching Vancouver glitter beneath clouds. "You always take care of everyone else," he said quietly, eyes on the skyline. "But I don't think many people take care of you." His words hit harder than he probably intended. Too true, too close. "I'm fine," she tried to insist. "I'm used to holding things together." He shook his head. "Even strong people deserve room to fall apart." Her breath caught, not from the cold. Before she could find a response, a soft knock echoed from inside the suite. They both stiffened, the moment dissolving as if someone had intruded on something fragile. At the door stood a hotel manager with a new key card. A second room had become available. Relief hit Mia first. Then hesitation. She looked at Evan. His expression was calm, but thoughtful, almost reluctant. "It's your choice," he said quietly. "If you'd feel more comfortable, we can switch." His tone was gentle, too gentle, and something in her chest pushed against the safe. Answer she should have given. She didn't want to lose the closeness, didn't want walls to rebuild between them just because a second door was now available. "I'm okay here," she said, keeping her voice steady even though her heart thudded hard. For a fraction of a second, his lips curved, a subtle smile, grateful and complicated all at once. She couldn't voice it yet. The words hovered on the edge of her thoughts, teasing her with the danger of exposure, the risk of disrupting what had begun so delicately. She only met his gaze, the quiet exchange heavy with a tension that neither could or dared to break. The air seemed almost alive, vibrating with restraint and unspoken admission. Evan didn't press. He leaned lightly against the balcony railing, giving her space while remaining close enough to feel the warmth of his presence. The shared silence stretched, slow and deliberate, marking a moment suspended between awareness and restraint. Neither of them moved for a long beat. Both were acutely conscious of the distance between them, aware that a single step could shift everything. It wasn't desire that tethered them, it was trust. The subtle recognition that each was navigating feelings unanticipated and uncharted. Mia felt her chest tighten, the pulse of possibility thrumming beneath her skin. A slow, steady realization that what they were cultivating wasn't fleeting. This connection wasn't a rush of infatuation or sudden romance. It was something steadier, built on shared honesty, mutual respect, and the fragile beginnings of awareness. Eventually, they moved back inside. Their footsteps were calm, measured, as if each movement could carry the weight of the unspoken. The suite felt different now, charged with an electric quiet, a sense that everything between them had shifted imperceptibly. Tidying up, preparing for the next day's meeting, they worked in synchrony, yet every glance, every exchange of paper, every subtle brush of fingertips felt amplified, heavy with meaning. Nothing crossed boundaries, and yet the emotional gravity lingered. A connection neither had intended but could not ignore. Mia understood then that the trip had already altered something fundamental. Their relationship had moved beyond professional courtesy into a space where vulnerability could exist, even thrive. It was a slow, cautious unfolding, A soft acknowledgement that beneath the routine of work lay untapped intimacy and unspoken care. The evening didn't end with confession or dramatics, it concluded with possibility, leaving them suspended on the delicate edge of what comes next. Hearts open yet protective, morning arrived softly, sunlight spilling through the wide windows, brushing across the scattered papers and polished floor. Mia woke first, coffee in hand, still caught in the afterglow of the previous evening. She sat at the edge of the bed, sipping slowly, mind replaying every subtle gesture, glance, and shift in tone. Work and emotion intermingled in ways she hadn't expected, and yet she forced herself to focus. The client meeting loomed, critical and demanding, but the traces of the night before clung to her awareness. Evan moved around the suite with calm precision, setting up his laptop, checking notes, humming lightly to himself. Every motion seemed magnetic, drawing her attention whether she intended it or not. His presence was steady, quiet, yet charged with something intimate and new. On the taxi ride, their conversation was practical and low, discussing last-minute notes and reminders, but beneath the surface, an unspoken current pulsed. When their eyes met for a brief moment, both flushed lightly, a silent acknowledgement of shared awareness. At the office, the morning's bustle did little to diffuse the energy between them. They coordinated seamlessly, professional yet subtly attuned to one another. Every compliment, every nod of encouragement carried layered meaning. When Mia presented part of the strategy, Evan's quiet support and occasional glance made her pulse hitch in ways that had nothing to do with work. She realized with a clarity that startled her, she wanted more than professional alignment. She wanted the connection from the sweet, the fragile intimacy, the understanding, the care to continue growing. Though she wasn't sure how to bridge the gap safely, the meeting ended with polite handshakes and smiles. Yet Evan's expression held an unusual tenderness. "You did great," he said softly, almost reverently. "Better than I expected." The warmth in his tone stirred something deep within Mia, a mixture of relief and longing she could barely contain. She thanked him, but the words felt insufficient, incapable of conveying the storm of emotion she held back at the hotel. As they packed for the flight home, the weight of unspoken feelings hovered. She noticed the small details, the way he adjusted his tie, the tilt of his posture, the careful precision in his movements, and recognized the intimacy in observation itself. Months of restrained office familiarity had condensed into days of concentrated, quiet awareness. When their belongings were packed, Evan paused, his gaze locking with hers. "Mia," he said, low and deliberate, "I don't want to cross any lines, and I don't want to complicate things. But I also can't pretend I don't feel something when I'm with you." Her chest constricted, heart hammering. She had expected this in some form, but the clarity and calm of his words carried a weight she hadn't anticipated. "I feel it too," she murmured, barely audible, recognizing the truth she had long restrained. "I just don't know what it means yet." Evan nodded, understanding the caution, the careful restraint that had defined her approach. There was no rush, no dramatic declaration, just a quiet acknowledgement of something mutual, something capable of growing without risk of burning too bright too quickly. He stepped closer, close enough to feel the warmth of his presence, but still respectfully distant. "We don't have to rush," he said gently, eyes searching hers. "But I'd like to see where this goes. If you want that too." The simplicity of his statement made her chest ache, longing, relief, anticipation, all at once. This wasn't a reckless moment of passion. It was a careful, rare beginning built on trust, emotional awareness, and mutual respect. The intensity between them was understated but undeniable. A slow-burning connection that felt thrilling in its restraint. Gathering their belongings, preparing to leave, Mia felt the culmination of the trip's subtle shifts. What began as a professional journey had evolved into a personal experience rich with vulnerability, tenderness, and unspoken longing. Even as they entered the taxi, the city moving past in familiar rhythm, the dynamic between them had irrevocably changed. Every glance, every careful touch, every low, shared word had forged an invisible bond, delicate yet electrifying. The flight home was uneventful, yet for Mia, time seemed suspended. The unspoken hung in the air, threading between them like a tangible presence. Evan's glances were softer, his attention measured yet quietly intimate. She felt drawn to him, pulled toward the tension and unvoiced emotion that had defined these past days. It wasn't urgent or overwhelming. It was considered, deliberate, and deeply emotional, an attraction born from respect, understanding, and shared honesty. Landing back in Seattle, the streets unchanged, both sensed a subtle difference in themselves. Their routines awaited, but beneath it lay the knowledge of a fragile beginning, a shared closeness neither could ignore. Mia realized her carefully restrained feelings had shifted into something she could no longer push aside. She wanted to explore the connection, slow and cautious, to see where honesty, attention, and intimacy might lead. Evan, beside her, seemed unchanged outwardly, yet his gaze carried a new depth, a quiet promise that the story begun on this trip was only just beginning. Returning to life, work, and responsibilities, the memory of glances, soft confessions, and shared presence lingered. This was no sweeping love story, no impulsive rush. This was the patient unfolding of hearts recognizing one another. A beginning built not on force or dramatics, but on trust, understanding, and slow, deliberate attention. Mia felt the thrill of knowing it was mutual, real, and potent with potential. The trip had ended, the client meeting behind them, and yet the story between them had only just begun, carried in quiet gestures, shared silences, and the unspoken acknowledgement of feelings neither could deny. It was a beginning nurtured by patience, awareness, and the subtle art of hearts finally learning to see each other.